Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Lily Bewley podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is your host, Lily Bewley, and I'm honored to have conversations here with thought leaders, visionaries, healers, and even solo conversations with myself about things I am currently reflecting on. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through our emotional trauma, allowing ourselves to be healthy, be happy, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us. And because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible. Yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and the love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. Today in episode 118, I welcome Michael Unbroken to the show to chat about Thinking Unbroken. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode or anything you would like me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. Remember, it is a safe place, and I would welcome the discussion. And also a request, if you are enjoying the show, please rate and share and review as you're listening to my voice so we can get the word out to more and more souls who want to heal. My guest today, from homeless to hero, Michael Unbroken is the founder of Think Unbroken, best-selling author, award-winning speaker, podcast host, coach, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma. Since 2016, Michael has empowered over 100,000 trauma survivors to get out of the vortex, which we talk about in this episode, learn to love themselves, and become the hero of their own story. Michael has written multiple books, including the bestseller Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, spoken in over 80 countries, won investments from Undercover Billionaire Grant Cardone, and is on a mission to end generational trauma in his lifetime. Please enjoy this conversation with Michael Unbroken. Michael, thank you for coming to the show. I know today's going to be an amazing conversation. Your story is so inspirational. I often tell myself, with my past abuse and my past trauma, it's a wonder that I'm either still alive or that I'm not in jail. So I bet that you can probably agree or at least come to some similar conclusions about your life. But I'm super excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, totally. I resonate with that a lot, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know. Do you want to start with your story? Your story is so powerful, and I feel, I know, like one of your missions is to break these trauma patterns and to break these generational patterns with what you do in your work. And you may not feel like it, but I see it, and I'm sure a lot of people do. That, like, you are breaking the cycle. Like, you're one of a lot of people that have gotten out of it, or at least are practicing it and actively practicing self-care and self-love and healing. Would you be open to sharing your story?
Yeah, of course. I'll give you the elevator version here, so we're not here all day. I grew up in Indiana. My mom was a drug addict and alcoholic. She actually cut off my right index finger when I was only 4 years old. And people always like, how could your mom do that? And I'm like, well, it was a continuation of hurt people hurting people, right? Her mom and her mom before her, and all, so on and so forth. When I was 6, she married my stepfather, super abusive. He kicked the shit out of my brothers and I, put me in the hospital multiple times. Like, nothing was more terrifying for me as a kid than walking through the front door of my house. And when I was about 8, we started getting evicted all the time. We started getting kicked out of our houses. We didn't have electricity, no heat, no running water. Like, I would go to school sometimes unbathed. Like, I was that kid. And I lived with 30 different families between the time that I was 8 to 12. And when I was 12 years old, my grandmother adopted me. which you think would be a heaven sent. And,
Mhm.
to some extent it was. But she was a really racist old white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of. And I'm biracial, black and white. So imagine the identity crisis that comes along with that.
Mhm.
And I started turning to drugs to kind of cope with things. And so I got high for the first time when I was 12, weed and popping pills, drunk when I was 13. And when I was 15, I got expelled from school for selling drugs. So I'm like breaking into houses, still in cars, selling drugs, running from the cops, getting shot at. Like it's fucking really crazy shit.
Mhm.
And I got put into a last chance program. And one of my teachers was like, look, dude, we're going to give you an opportunity. We're done with you, but we're going to give you this chance. And so I get in this last chance program. My mom was in a rehab. I actually got straight A's for the first time in my life, which was really crazy. And then when my mom got out of rehab, she relapsed, and you could watch this on my report card. Boom, right back to straight F's. And
Mm.
I don't graduate high school. I have to go to summer school. And in summer school, which is incredibly fucking embarrassing, the summer school teacher is basically like, we're just going to give you your diploma. We're done with you. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, that's weird. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And so I'm working all these incredibly remedial, nonsensical jobs. I was working at this warehouse, the one that always comes to mind. I was putting microchips in motherboards all day long. Boom, 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 12 hours a day, standing up, 5-minute breaks. It was nonsense. It literally, you could watch the desperation in people's eyes. Like that is
Mm.
where dreams went to die. And I got fired, probably because I was stoned. And I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, hold on, this is crazy. I'm like 18 and a half. And I'm like, what's the solution for this? For poverty, for homelessness, for abuse, for all
Mm.
this? And I was like, oh, it's money. It's got to be money. It's the one thing we've never had, and it's the one thing that always caused all the problems. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to go make $100,000 a year legally by the time that I'm 21. And that legal part was very, very important because I've been in handcuffs multiple times. I have family in prison for life. And as of today, my 3 childhood best friends have been murdered.
Wow.
Like I knew what the fuck was about to happen if I didn't change that.
Mhm.
And so I end up landing a job with a Fortune 10 company at 20 years old, start making 6 figures with no high school diploma, no college education. It's pretty insane. And my life became a complete disaster. Fast forward a few years, I'm 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep. I'm high from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to bed. Like it is literally a disaster. And I hit rock bottom. And I wake up this one morning and I'm laying in bed smoking a joint, fucking eating chocolate cake and watching the CrossFit games. Like I was just like, what the fuck is happening? And I went in the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror. And I remember being 8 years old and the water company had come and turned off our water. But that was common, right? Turn off our water, turn off electricity, pink notice on the door, whatever. But this particular day, I grabbed this little blue bucket. I walked across the street to our neighbor's house, and it's like this blistering hot Indiana summer day. And I stole water from the side of their house. And I remember being like, when I'm a grown up, this will not be my life.
Mhm.
And it wasn't financially, but it was in every other way because I was that hurt, lost little boy. And as I looked in that mirror, I asked myself a question, changed my life forever. I said, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And ultimately, the answer became no excuses, just results. And what that meant was a few different things, but predominantly it meant to stop blaming fucking people for my life. Because let me be very clear about this. You're not culpable for the bad things that happen to you. That is not on you. But at some point, you have got to realize you are not a child anymore. And
Mm.
you have to free yourself of the bonds of that mindset. And you have to stop playing the victim. And that's all I did. Like it was everybody's fault. Your fault, my parents' fault, Obama's fault. Like it was everybody's fault. It was never Michael's fault for anything that ever happened. And in that moment of making that choice and that decision, it was really true. No excuses, just results. Change your fucking life. And 12 years later, here I am talking to you.
Mm. So did the definition of results change for you? Because that happened with me in my life when I was like, I was basically making a shit ton of money, but I partied it all away, completely irresponsible, and I lost, obviously, like I lost it all. But in my, like, from to then for me today, was like the idea of results has changed for me. It's like my definition of results. Does that gel with your experience at all?
Well, my definition of I had no definition of results until that moment. And in that moment
Got
of
you.
looking in the mirror and coming up with that, wherever that came from, no excuses, just results. It was truly about show up. That
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah.
It was about, I didn't know what results meant. No one's ever actually asked me that question before. So that's amazing. No, there was no definition. The only thing that I knew is that all I had ever done was give up on myself. There was always a reason to quit. I would drive. I'll give you a great story. I'd put my gym bag in my car every single day, and I would drive to the gym. And in the parking lot of this gym is a McDonald's and a bar. I mean, talk about great product placement, McDonald's.
Was it
Fuckers.
Planet Fitness? Just
It
kidding.
wasn't.
Okay.
But that's very common. I'm sure they're owned by the same conglomerate. And so anyway, I would sit in the car and I would smoke a cigarette and I would look at the gym. And be like, as soon as I'm done with this cigarette, I'll go in. And then I'd walk over to McDonald's and I'd always get Big Mac extra large with 2 apple pies and fucking like a Mountain Dew or some bullshit. And then I would walk into that bar, have a couple of drinks, smoke a cigarette, look at that gym, get in my car, and say tomorrow.
You're making me sick over here, even just going through this story. It's so triggering for me. Keep going though. It's good.
But that's life, right? We do
Yeah.
that all the time. And that's what I was doing. And then when this no excuses, just results mentality came in, it was like the only way this changes is by changing it. And so this is me at 25, 26. And from that point till about 29, 30 were the hardest 3-4 years of my life. Because it was like fucking 1 step forward, 8 million steps back. I was reprogramming myself. I was getting physically healthy. I was battling all these addictions. I was trying to step into figuring out who I was, ending a relationship, moving across the country, getting deep into this personal journey, doing the work, showing up. And it was like, God damn, every fucking day, it's like, boom, 1 step forward, 1 million step backwards. But I said, doesn't fucking matter. No excuses. Keep going every day. And that's just what I kept doing. And for some people now, I recognize the environment in which I operate. There are people who need that incredibly gentle, kind, unbelievably compassionate self-talk. I am not that fucking person. And so for me, a big part of it was just kicking myself in the ass. Stop letting yourself fucking down. Stop it. And that's a truth. And in that truth, what results became was just showing up every day, right? I'm going to write books. I'm going to start podcasts. I'm going to run marathons. I'm going to coach people. I'm going to get myself healthy. I'm going to not smoke. I'm going to not get drunk every single day. I'm going to take care of my finances. I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to do whatever the fuck it takes to have the life I want to have. And that's what results is. It's only measurable by me.
Yeah. I think that's what I was getting to, is that for me, what I like I said, it's the definition inside my heart and my soul of what that means, right? It's more subjective than it is objective, which I think is a paradigm shift for a lot of a lot of people, even in personal development, really, when results is this is what I say is it's supposed to be like. But for you, it sounds like it was showing up. And that's been a big one as I've been healing, is if I show up, if I just do what I need to do to show up for myself, this is my translation, everything else will come. Everything else will come.
On a long enough timeline.
Oh yeah, 100%. Ooh, that's a good one. So thank you for that. Dope. Amazing. Your breaking point and your rock bottom period, is that what you called the vortex? And if not, because I read your book, I read 100 pages of the Think Unbroken book that you have. And I'm wondering if you'd like to share kind of what the vortex is for if we haven't already covered it for people out there.
Yeah, we haven't, but you're in the book, you're just starting to get into it, right? That's that place, that's that darkness in all of us, that place of our limiting beliefs, that place in which we hold ourselves back, that place in which we spin these narratives that other people have instilled in us, where we don't show up, where we don't do the thing we say we're going to do, where everything's a fucking disaster and you're playing the victim, and the words that you're using, like think about this. Here's a real simple analogy. Like I guess not analogy, but the words that you're using with yourself, like, are so mean and so fucking unkind. Like, if you said that to me, I would punch you in the face. And it's like, you expect to be successful. Like, you've got to really take inventory of the way that you talk to yourself. And, I realized about 2 weeks ago, like, really the scope of the healing journey that I've been on, because I was in the kitchen and I was just like, not like paying attention as I'm cooking, and there's all the things, blah, blah, blah. And I hit this glass and it falls to the ground and shatters. And it was full of water. And I go back about 8 years ago, I would have destroyed myself for that. And so many people do. And I was just like, it's fine, it's fucking glass, whatever. And that's what it's about. Like, the vortex is that place of self-deprecation, of self-betrayal, when you're hurting, when you're unwilling to leave the relationship, quit the job, start the show, work out, quit the cigarette, like, whatever it is. It's not even always about quitting, but it's about doing, it's about taking action. And so when you can just shift the way that you talk about yourself, everything around you will start to change. And that was the hardest thing for me, was getting to this place about, like, can I love myself? Right. And getting to a place of being comfortable with even saying it, because the truth about it, when you're growing up, here's what people really need to hold on to. We are based on learned experiences. Everything that happens in our life adds up and equals to who we are today, whether you fucking like it or not. And what you have to understand is that programming instilled in you, especially if you're a child of trauma, of having parents who are belittling, who are like egomaniacs or narcissistics, or they pit you against each other. They tell you you're stupid, you're ugly, you're dumb. Like, this is in your home. And then guess what? Now it's like reiterated in school. You're probably getting bullied, right? There's all these things happening. And then you see it in the environment because you're not pretty enough according to standards. Well, who's fucking standards, right? And you go through all this process, and all you're ever doing in your brain is you're like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares about me. And the only way I'm going to have value in the world is by either fucking people or making money. And then what happens is you're in this place in your life where you're like, wait a second, hold on. That's dark. That's consuming everything about me. That's the vortex.
I've been in the vortex. I've been in the vortex. I think, it's so, I think one of my favorite things about this podcast, one of my biggest values, along with showing up, is talking about the shit that people don't talk about. And this is the shit that people don't talk about. Is, I think what I realized when I was in the pit of the vortex is, like, I was you talked about in your book about suicide and suicidal ideations. And that was me. Like, when I was holding, and the listeners know about this, but when I was holding the gun in my hand, I feel like that was the only day up until that point that I realized I had choice, right? Like, real choice to make change, to choose me instead of choosing what you're saying, like, fucking people over and making money, or whatever it is, like, whatever that driver is. It's such a huge, that's so good.
Yeah. And the thing about that choice too is, like, one of the things that people need to understand is that when you're growing up in trauma, really, I think in general, when you're growing up, like, I would even remove just the scope of trauma from what I'm about to say. We're influenced by our environment, right? And what happens is, every time we try to be ourselves, more often than not, there's a negative influence of our environment that says you're not allowed to do that, right? It's think about this. You're in third grade, you're in Miss Smith's class, and you have this picture of the house, and you decide to color the house purple and the moon purple, and everything's fucking purple because that's what you wanted to do. And Miss Smith comes up to you and she laughs. And she goes, that's not how you do that. And then all the kids laugh, and now you're embarrassed, and now you're shamed, and now you're in this thing where your brain, because it is a meaning-making machine built on one purpose, which is survival, says, wait a second, by biology, I know that if I get ostracized from this community, I'm going to die. And so now the brain says, actually, hold on, wait a second. So at school, this happens, and at home, it happens too. And I'm not allowed to be myself, because when I'm myself, I get hurt physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, hell, religiously, whatever it is. And then your brain says, well, I don't want to do that anymore. Why would I do that? If my whole service is to survive, why would I ever move towards being myself? Because every time I move towards being myself, there's danger, and that equals death. And so guess what? It becomes autonomic that you chameleon yourself. So many people pretend to be somebody else so that they can be safe. And the worst part about that is that serves you for a period of time. So when you're 8, 12, 14, it makes sense because you're fucking surviving. And then what happens is you're 24, 36, 57 years old, and you don't know how to say yes, and you don't know how to say no. And for those of us that are so willing to step into this incredibly daunting journey of figuring out who the fuck we are, that process consumes all aspects of you. Because what happens is, whereas most children have the ability to learn who they are in a safe and positive, reaffirming environment in which when they make mistakes, they don't get their fucking head slammed into the wall, that doesn't hold true for so many others like myself. And so what happens is, in real time, as an adult, you are learning what children should already know. And so you're making meaning of figuring out who you are, but the stakes are so much higher. And so when it comes to choice, the most terrifying thing that you can do is make a decision, because you've never been allowed to fucking do it before. And if you want to become who you are, you have to start deciding who you are. And then in that, what will happen is you will, like a blooming onion, I have no idea why I just referenced that, but you will start to come into your own, and you will have all of these experiences in which show you who you are. And some of those experiences are not going to hold true. And you'll be like, actually, I hate this. And others, you're going to be like, this is exactly who I am. And the deeper that you go into this journey, and you understand the truth that you've never been allowed to be you before. And so it really sucks to figure it out the hard way, this 4-year window in which I was constantly failing, right? And still do to some extent on a daily basis, by the way. But you start to reinforce your belief in who you are. You start to build confidence. You start to understand your capacity to be you. And then you get to this really beautiful place, if you play this game long enough, in which you have these things called boundaries. And in that, what happens is you will only ever do what you want to do, and you will never do what you don't want to do. And that is choice.
That's beautiful. It's true. Absolutely true. There are so many misconceptions, I feel like, about boundaries out there. Does anything pop in your head about like what grinds your gears about the way people talk about boundaries? Because I think I just heard it, and I think it's very similar to, I don't know, to what's happening on my side, but I'm curious.
I don't know that anything like, look, I live in the personal development space. There's a lot of shit that pisses me off about this space. But in this particular, nothing comes to mind. And I think the most important thing for people to hold on to when it comes to boundaries is just simply understanding that boundaries are really about protecting yourself. It's not about it's not about keeping people out. I have a lot of people in, right? It's about protecting yourself from people who shouldn't be there, right? I'll give you a great example. Most people cannot set effective boundaries. Actually, let's go into this. most people cannot set effective boundaries because they don't know their values. And if you don't know your values, you don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, well, how can you have boundaries, right? It's an oxymoron. What I always do when I'm coaching people is the first thing we do is take them literally, whether you're doing a high-end coaching program or an online app or what, I don't give a shit. I talk about it all the time. Values is where we begin. And values are just simply these words for you understanding the framework of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's values are different, right? And so my values very simply are honesty, kindness, leadership, self-actualization, and no excuses. That is, if you like put me into a thing, a pill, that would be all the ingredients, right? And so every decision that I make when it comes to boundaries, what I will and will not do, filter through that. Perfect example. Real time, right now, having this conversation. If I did not feel like you were in alignment in some capacity with my values, I would not be here. Mm-hmm. I turn down people all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's not because I don't think they're doing good things, but like we are not in alignment. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the most important thing, is just making sure that your values they're not about keeping people out. They're about protecting yourself. And I think people get that twisted all the time. Yeah. Right. Because you want to make sure that you stay in alignment with other human beings. It's so important.
100%.
Because like, I don't want to be around someone who clearly is dishonest, who is not kind, who is not a leader, who is not self-actualized, and who always makes excuses, the polar opposite of me, right? Mm-hmm. Why would I ever want to do that? Mm-hmm. And so getting a massive amount of clarity on your values first and foremost. And if you don't know, people will be like, well, I don't know what my values are. Okay, cool. Get this thing called a dictionary and start thinking or go to dictionary.com. Nobody actually has a fucking dictionary. Go to dictionary.com,
You're old
whatever.
School like that.
It's literally over here. And start looking up words. Look up words that you think relate to the person that you are. And then write down the definition of that word as you perceive it and see if that holds true, right? Because what will happen is they'll ebb and they'll flow and they'll shift. And then one day you'll land on the ones that make sense. And then you'll use those as a filtering mechanism to determine every action you take in your life.
Yep. That's it. You just pretty much laid out the second phase of my dating program. So thanks. That's all we need. We're done here. I'm just kidding. But it is. And I think, to me, I think the nuance, and this is from my experience, I think the nuance in that is, and I love that dictionary exercise, but I still don't think that I would have been able to gain as much clarity as like I'm sitting here with you here today, and what I teach, which is basically, trauma-informed dating. But I needed to heal the internal parts of me, because I always say, I don't know if you gel with this, but like I always say, like, trauma had me looking outside of my life and like the size of a pinhole. So I had no room. It was either black or white. It was either like death or destruction. It was either, it was like very polar. And as I began to heal, people would be like, just speak up for your needs and your wants and your desires. I'm like, I have no fucking clue. Like, I really had no idea. But for me, the process was a process of like thawing and becoming unfrozen, and just opening up that space so that I could start to read those words in the dictionary and not be so like, I don't know, and just kind of connect with them. Does that make sense? Is that similar to what you experienced? Or
yeah, the most dangerous sentence in the human English vocabulary is, this is just who I am. Ugh. And I think that what happens is, and this was my experience, I'm incredibly stubborn. Like, I know that about myself. It is simultaneously my greatest attribute and probably my greatest flaw. But I know that about myself. And the key of all this is know thyself. And I used to constantly, all the time, when I was being a terrible person, because guess what? I used to be a fucking monster. I'd be like, this is just who I am. You don't like it? That's your problem. That is black and white. That is pinhole. That is not looking at the world from this scope of understanding your impact. Now, a big part of that comes from having to stuff down emotions and be an emotional recluse and probably at some point being a sociopath and having to figure out how to actually feel. I didn't cry for 15 years. It literally got beat out of me. Like my stepdad would beat me to the point where he was like, if you cry, I will beat you harder. And that happened every single day. So I learned how to stop crying, literally survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And so all these emotional response other people would have would freak me out. Like, honestly, if we were dating and like I pissed you off, which I probably was going to, and you cried, I would freak out. Right. And I'd be like, stop crying. You're fine. It's not a big deal. Like whatever it was. Right. And it would always be followed up by, this is who I am. If you don't like it, leave. Right. And that is so dangerous. It's so dangerous to think about the world like that, because when you get that black and white, that means there's no space for iteration. And without space for iteration, there's no space for growth, because the only way you're going to grow is through the failures of the experimentations of tapping into these elements of yourself that you believe hold true. And so when you're in this place and you're trying to truly understand who you are, a big part of this is about having the capacity to deploy a massive amount of grace to explore. And I think that's where people get stuck, and they're like, well, I have a therapist. Yeah, but your therapist might suck. You might need a different one.
Yep.
Right. No offense to therapists, but you get my point. Right. And
100.
it's like, people are like, I read a book and it didn't work. Yeah, no shit. Cause you read a book. Right. And it's like, you have to keep going through this process and trying all these different things and putting yourself in a position to learn about who you are by doing things that are immensely uncomfortable. And the more that you're willing to do that, the more that narrative of self will actually start to shed, and you'll realize what you can actually do is create who you want to be. One of the sub chapter titles of that book, as you get into one of the later sections, is Create You. Because that's what this process is. You're literally creating yourself from scratch.
Yep.
And if you're holding on to these narratives that you know who you are, you're in bad fucking trouble. Because what you're going to really figure out, the deeper that you get into this, is actually that you have no idea who you are, and it's incredibly irresponsible for you to think so. But instead, what you do is you reinforce your understanding of your truth through finding out whether or not who it is that you think you are is in fact that person.
Yep.
And that only comes by giving yourself the space to remove binary thing. Let me put it this way. I'm very binary in many, many aspects of my life, meaning yes or no, black or white, one or two, right? Especially when it comes to business. When it comes to my emotional well-being, I am willing to try anything. Name a modality, I've done it. From the most woo-woo shit to the most plant-based shit, like I've done it all. Why? Because I knew that I could not be binary and so black and white about this healing journey, because the one thing someone has might be the one thing that I need. And if you're in this place where that is your narrative, that is the ultimate fixed mindset. And you need to go read Mindset by Carol Dweck immediately. You need to stop listening to this and go buy that book right now and change your life.
Yeah. And when you come back, I want to say, I just put out a post about this a couple of days ago about like healing is it's a paradox, because what you think that you need, it's sometimes not exactly what you need at all. And it's like what you don't need is exactly what you don't need. And it's just, for me, like we were talking about choice, it's just that choice, or just that knowledge that there is a better way. And I may not know what it is, but at least like just unfreezing just a little bit could just open to a new opportunity or a new connection or a new, like a good connection instead of, all this good stuff.
Yeah. And it's okay to be scared as you're going through this, because it's unknown. And, I remember the first time I walked into a yoga studio, I was still about 300 pounds and I was in fucking Indiana. Do you know how many people do yoga in Indiana a decade ago? None. And so I'm like walking in, and it's just all these really fit women, all these really buff dudes. And I'm like fucking overweight and shit still. And I was just like, fuck this. You have to step into the fear around the things that you know will make your life better. Because if you don't, your life will not change. And that fear is often an indicator that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to be scared. Like we're all scared. I'm scared all the time. It's fine.
Yeah.
But you cannot be a coward. And that's a very different experience.
That's so beautifully stated. Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. I definitely wanted to talk about this before we close up, which is about trauma. Obviously, you have, I think you mentioned you have an ACE score of 10. I think I have an 8 or a 9. How do you define trauma? Trauma is being talked a lot. You've been in the game for a minute, but it's also, there's a lot more Instagram posts about it. People are starting to talk about it and all that stuff. How do you define trauma? And I think what I'm also asking is, do people have to go through, and this is what I say. I always say that you don't have to go through what I went through to have the same problems as I do.
Yeah, totally.
Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. Well, one, I think if you're ever playing a comparison game when it comes to bad things, you need to really pause and take inventory of your life.
True.
Trauma for me, look, here's how I think about it a lot. It's not this finger that my mom cut off. It's not the scars. It's not the burns. It's not the home. It's none of that stuff. And again, this is my definition because you asked me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the theft of identity. That's the thing that is so much about what trauma is. It's that thing that's been stolen from you, because scars heal. Like, I had fucking 6 surgeries on this finger. It works well enough. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the burns are covered, like they're fine. Like, that stuff has happened. Now, of course, you need to understand that your body holds trauma. So I'm not being dismissive of the physical implications of that abuse,
Mm-hmm.
but everyone talks about that. And you asked me my definition. And my definition is the theft of identity. That is the hardest aspect of this journey, because your body will heal. You can make that healthy, but until you cut control over your mind, you are still going to be trapped in the matrix.
That's powerful. That's powerful. It just reminds me of episode 1, which is like, here on this space, which is, again, what is codependency? I'm like, that doesn't feel right to me. Because I think I mentioned, like, I just started reading the definitions. I'm like, no, it really feels like a disconnection from myself. And that's how I defined my codependency going forward.
Yeah. And it's okay to have your own definition. I want to point to that too.
Yeah.
Because people are so dogmatic in
Yep.
this conversation.
Yep.
We're like, this is how it's got to be. I'm like, no, fucking, it doesn't. It can be whatever you want it to be. I was on somebody's show the other day, and we got into an actual argument on this show because I was like, I don't agree with your thoughts about this, and you don't agree with my thoughts about this, but it's okay to have that disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be dogmatic, and you don't have to live in this place where it's exactly what other people say, because this whole process is about you deciding what you want. Mm-hmm. And that's the key.
That's the healing.
Yeah, that's how you know you're healed. Like, it really truly is. I know that's a weird thing because people are like, well, I decided to drink water. I'm like, that doesn't really fucking count. You have to drink water, and B, it doesn't count. It's about, how are you showing up in the world? Are you living authentically as yourself? Are you not making excuses? Are you keeping up your boundaries? Are you moving towards your wants, your needs, your interests? Do you know your values? Are you showing up? Are you leaving the things that are bad for you and stepping into the things that are good for you? Are you not bending who you are so that you're placating other people for safety, right? And that, we can go in deeper into that, but that's ultimately what it's about. It doesn't have to be that's your definition, so that's right. It's about, this is what it felt like for me.
That's beautiful. And what a great sense of agency, just in figuring out who you are. If you are in that stage where you are kind of reading the books and the podcasts and doing all the things, and that's how I feel like just what you're talking about, it's that's how you create an identity, is being like, no, that doesn't feel right to me. This is what it really feels like to me. And it's, I don't know. And then you do start to kind of maybe make purpose around it, or start to talk about it. I don't know. Anyways, it's
spot on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, let's close up here. What did we not cover? What's up for you? Anything that any final words you want to?
What did we not cover in 30 minutes?
Yeah.
The entire human experience.
Yes.
So, look, I think there's so much to this. I mean, I hope that if anything, this will be a conversation that'll just plant a seed for someone, and I think that's the most important thing, because acknowledgement is how you begin this process. And it's just sitting in it, learning from these conversations, being present in your truth. And that's a word people throw around a lot these days, but your truth is really, honestly, it's about honoring who you are. Mm-hmm. And if you can start there, and be willingness to face the slings and arrows of those around you. Because one of the things inevitable that will happen is people around you are going to be like, you're changing, you're different. And you fucking should be. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay-Z has this amazing quote that I think is where I'd like to leave off. He goes, people around you saying that you changed. Well, I didn't do all this work to stay the same.
Mm-hmm. Drop. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for being on the show. I so appreciate you. Thank you for your work and your purpose. Where can people find you? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, I'm everywhere at Michael Unbroken. If you just check out Michael Unbroken on all the socials, and you can actually download Think Unbroken for free on ebook if you just go to book.thinkunbroken.com. I mean, if you want to buy the book, like whatever, I don't give a shit, but you can read it for free if you just go to book.thinkunbroken.com.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on today.
For sure. My pleasure, my friend. Anytime.
Thank you. Ooh, y'all. I don't know if you feel that fire, but that fire was on this podcast today. This is probably one of my favorite recordings, to be completely honest. I've been following Michael for a while now. It's an honor to have him on the show, and just like so refreshing to talk about these deep subjects with such clarity, such honesty, such commitment, such authenticity. Also, a beautiful display of the healed masculine, if for those women out there, and really just like such a great conversation. Such a great conversation. This is probably going to be one that I tend to like to gravitate with this work here in this space in the podcast. I tend to gravitate towards certain ones that I feel I don't know, it's just like this, it's just felt really aligned, and this was one of those conversations. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know, drop me a DM on Instagram to tell me what you thought about. I would gladly receive that feedback. But Michael is such an inspiration, and he is a hero. And just like I'm a hero, just like you're a hero, just like as we're healing, we are heroes stepping into this new life. This life that we maybe don't even know is possible, but we have to go day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, and be aware and take small steps to get to where we want to go, those big dreams and those big desires. So I'm so honored to have you here. Before we close up, don't forget to support the show at the link in the show notes, and you click on support. I want to shout out to Lee, you know who you are, for supporting me in the show. So what happens when I get these support memberships, and it's, you can choose between like $1 a month, $5 a month, or $10 a month. But what it really helps me do is just an energy exchange, for one thing, for all the time that I spend recording these episodes with great guests, finding them, production. And hey, I love my coffee too. So if you want to buy me a coffee, I would gladly receive that. But you can support the show, and I would love to receive that support by clicking on the link in the show notes and clicking on support and choosing what option you would like. Thank you again, Lee, for your contribution. I'm so excited and so honored that you're here in this space with me. And as always, my loves, thank you for being here. There's so much gratitude flowing from my big heart today, right directly to yours. And I want you to know that you are supported, you are loved, you are whole. You don't need to be fixed. And I'm so glad that you are here. I'll see you next time.